Welcome back. I've got 3 stories and 3 numbers for you to bear in mind. 15 is the number of years of player-made content that has been rendered inaccessible because Media Molecule have removed online access for LittleBigPlanet 3. And this actually does matter. User-generated content is what just about all of the industry bigwigs are pushing forward, because obviously, pretty good if your customers can also do development for you. But that actually brings into question a massive problem nobody has dealt with preservation. 0 is our second number, and that is the amount of censorship that Stellar Blade announced on their social media that they will have. There has, though, been another story that has appeared since then and since the game came out, so we've recorded a little extra segment for that. Metacritic scores, OpenCritic scores, and graffiti. We'll talk about that in a bit. And the third number is 3, because 3 years, 7 months, and 4 days is the amount of time it's been between Brackeys' last video published on YouTube and the most recent one, because one of the big names in game development, tutorials, and social media, has actually unquit in a way. It's really cool, but given all the news that has happened, do you think he's making content about Unity, or do you think it's something else? And if that's the sort of thing that you're into, you'll absolutely love today's sponsor. Our friends at Boot.dev, they're going to teach you back-end web development, which is an amazing skill, in this case with Python and Go, and doing it the smart way by making it fun. You see, they're an online self-paced platform 100% designed to get you writing lots of code, and not just any code. You'll be working through role-playing game-inspired problems, and like Boot.dev itself is an RPG. It's got quests, levels, XP, achievements, and you can get 25% off your first purchase by using my link and code. They have an incredible, very complete learning path for the field that is focused on the stuff we actually like. Role-playing game stuff is woven through their courses, like developing and deploying a Pokédex, learning object-oriented programming through RPG combat examples, that sort of thing. It's an approach to learning that's like actually trying to leverage things that we enjoy to help these concepts click. They're shipping new content all the time, and what really matters as well is what's around it, be it their Discord community, their like boots, their like little bots to actually help you learn. It is crazy because it doesn't just give you the answer, it's really good at actually walking you through the steps to come up with a solution yourself. It's just a really well put together platform, which makes sense. It's made by people who like the sort of things that we like and who are experienced in the actual, field of back-end development. Now you can check them out today at boot.dev/Bellular News. That code gets you 25% off your first purchase, and that is backed by a no questions asked 30-day money-back guarantee. They've even got free demos for all their courses. Pretty sweet. So thanks, Boot, and let's roll. With that said, let's talk about the burning of the library of LittleBigPlanet. This is sad, and this is a case study in just how badly a future of user-generated content could go. Because back in January, the multiplayer servers for LittleBigPlanet 3 and PS4 were taken offline. This was because of a malicious mod that was actively getting accounts banned if they had ever played the game, which is pretty rough. And at the time, this was framed as a temporary takedown. People then remembered how things had gone in 2021 when the team at Media Molecule had seen DDoS attacks causing outages across PS4, PS3, and Vita servers. Only PS4 servers survived the round of technical fixes. It was just gone from the other platforms. And then this spring, Sony were of course in the middle of laying off staff at Media Molecule, and we had heard that it was either layoffs at one of Sony's technical groups, I believe, that was doing VR. I've forgotten their name, but they're based in London. It was either that or Media Molecule gets closed. So a rough time. And of course, if anyone had, because of all of this, been a bit worried about the LittleBigPlanet 3 servers and all of the user-generated content, well, they were right to be afraid, because the servers are now going to be kept offline indefinitely. Players now have got no way to access any online services for the game. They can't share content. They can't even download backups or archives or anything like that. This is absolutely terrible. One of the coolest things about LittleBigPlanet, it wasn't like the core game bit, it was that it kind of operated as its own little game engine, and people made so many amazing things for it. With those things being gone, this is what they said. Ongoing technical issues means that the stuff will just, no longer be available. Those servers will be down indefinitely. And they say user-generated content stored locally will remain available. Any new UGC you create can be played on your PS4, but can't be shared. That is awful. Now, there is a bit of a mercenary argument to this. It's the idea that Media Molecule clearly just cannot dedicate the resources to fixing this. They're obviously embattled given everything with Sony, everything with them having layoffs, but the challenge here is this is kind of not the point, because LittleBigPlanet was created to showcase the creativity of users. It is why people bought those games, it's why people played those games, and they were doing this before Fortnite, before Roblox were really focusing on user-generated content, and before that was some sort of like big investment buzzword. And that's why when the sequels came out, they continued to let people access levels made in previous LittleBigPlanet games. And that's the point here. This means that the whole 15 years worth of maps and levels across the 3 LittleBigPlanet games, those are gone and dead. There are people who spent hundreds, thousands of hours, as is pointed out here by a user on Twitter. There was over 10 million levels, and of course a majority of that stuff, as they point out, will not have been archived. This person saying, heck, some of my childhood levels I made are probably lost forever, as I never made backups as a kid. Even if it's understandable why this has happened, that absolutely sucks. And again, just to like reinforce how much this kind of thing matters to the industry, this is what Andrew Wilson, the CEO of EA, said about UGC. On a 5 to 10 year time horizon, what we expect to see and what we've started to see is that there will be creation of new worlds that will fit right next to the worlds that we create. Minutes engaged and money spent correlates on almost a one-to-one basis. So whether we create the content or our community creates the content, provided it's high quality, provided it's engaging, it represents an extraordinary opportunity for us. Money. Obviously, right? Now, the problem here is not the games include, user-generated content or that those are, building communities. It's that ultimately, right, they'll be following the money, all of these companies, the same as they do with every single trend. That's all understandable. The real problem here is that they will probably be doing this in a thoughtless way. The quickest way that they can get that UGC existing. And just like with live services today and all of the stuff that has been in the news with, online games just being dead, the idea that you can even have a physical disc for a game that you basically can put into your console and then not play. Legacy is important, and there is clearly no planning for the long term here, because once these things are no longer of commercial interest, they will simply be tossed aside because conservation, art, that kind of thing does not matter to these companies. And with LittleBigPlanet, like ideally the way that this would happen is you would say, right, we've got to take these servers down. You need to back up your things. And here is a fan-made hosting solution or something. Like that is the way to do this. Now, again, we've already seen Sony close multiple studios in the last few years with Media Molecule. That they were rumored to be closed. So in a world where Media Molecule goes, what happens to the library of work that users built in LittleBigPlanet? I think that would probably just go, because if you're Sony, you don't give a shit about any of that. One Sony game that people will still be able to access is Stellar Blade. Before we get into the other stuff that was kind of actually scheduled for this video, well, the game came out and there's a few other things to discuss. Number one, actually, the reviews are pretty stellar. An 84% score from 50 outlets reporting with an 89% recommendation. People are basically praising graphical fidelity, performance, which is of course helped by it being a PlayStation exclusive, and the combat system that actually, when you're really getting into it, people are saying is maybe some of the best of a generation. Hell yeah, that's awesome. Now, there are some minor critiques, things like open world mechanics, pacing, writing, but that's essentially not overwhelming how good the core combat experience is in the game. And it's also been a great week for the marketing team. They're obviously thrilled that the game's doing great, but there has been one other thing that has trended on social media. So obviously during a review period, well, reviewers have got access to a game earlier than the rest of us, right? And that basically means that often it's reviewers that end up, posting things. So one piece of feedback that came from multiple English-speaking people was that basically on a path to a key location, there is a bit of graffiti that says hard, and then there is basically a neon sign for a shop that says R shop, so people can then read that as hard R. So hard R, of course, to many people is alluding to a pronunciation of the N-word, and that essentially raised some eyebrows, and that led to, I think, a lot of the obvious things happening on social media. Obviously, could this be referring to an R-rated film? Could be, But that's not what people are sort of taking away from it. What is my sort of opinion in this? I mean, I think it's very simple. Like, there's a lot of people who are saying that, you know, on the one hand, that this is some obviously, you know, super offensive thing that the devs have done to, like, make a point. I just don't. Like, this is a team where, you know, English will be the second language. Actually, there's probably people in the team who don't speak English. So this is honestly the sort of thing that I think just happens. And it is, I think, a completely honest mistake. This could be random placement of graffiti that just happens to align, and you know, ultimately I do think that it's probably that. There's some similar things that happen whenever Americans talk about their IRA. That's really funny to us here in Ireland, because whenever we think IRA, we certainly don't think of an individual retirement account. So some reviewers point that out. I don't think that anybody being reasonable would say that this was some intentional thing, right? I think anyone being reasonable would say this is almost certainly just an honest mistake, and that's what it is. And so reviewers pointed this out, and they decided to change it, and that's basically that. Now, some people are taking this as some sort of story of censorship. I don't think that it is that. I think that this is a mistake that is an eyebrow-raising look in especially one of the regions this game is sold in. That mistake is, I think, not a part of the creative vision, right? An honest mistake that they wanted to patch out. I think that's basically the story. And the other side of the story, of course, is that it's a really bloody good game, which is always good to hear. Now, Sony have had, like, a few little experiences with things like this. They actually got some blowback on Miles Morales, where a flag in a character's room was mistakenly Cuban instead of Puerto Rican. Now, that's one of those things where, you know, probably an honest mistake, obviously not ideal. So what do? Well, you find the probably random oversight in set dressing a level, you change it, and then, you know, done. Not really a problem. Now, obviously, there has been a spicier dimension to this playing out in social media. Ultimately, I think for the people who are saying this is intentional racism from the devs, I think that's honestly, I just think that's kind of a bit stupid and probably in bad faith. You know, it's probably give people the benefit of the doubt first, and given how video games are made, a simple oversight like this is an extremely easy thing to happen. And if you're actually working on a game day in, day out, stuff just does not register to you because you've been looking at the same thing. I mean, I'm sure you know what it's like if you've tried, you know, anything in Photoshop. It's like you end up looking at the same image to the point where you can barely tell it apart from another version of itself, right? So I think it's just that. Some other people are then saying that this is like a censorship thing. I think this is quite obviously not a censorship thing. This is just an unintentional thing that they are correcting. Now, that said, there has been a whole discussion about censorship and this game, and that is because the Stellar Blade Twitter account posted this, and it posted in both English and Japanese. That's what we were initially going to talk about in this video, so I'm going to cut back to old me, and trust me, this part of the story is, I mean, if you're thinking about booty, it's not about that. It's actually about something else entirely, so much so that Dead Space and the Callisto Protocol get involved. Enjoy, and I'll hand it over to past me. There's been quite a discussion because this week Shift Up Corporation posted this tweet days before the launch of the PlayStation exclusive Stellar Blade in the West. Stellar Blade offers the uncensored version in all countries, including the Japanese version, right? Now, obviously, if you've been following the endless meta conversation on Stellar Blade, you will know that this game features a feminine robot protagonist who is basically wearing, like, you know, skin tight, sort of like armor suit. There is ass, something that the overall creative mind behind the game is, you know, very, very focused on. So, yes, a strong physics-based implementation. Thing is, though, it's also a PlayStation game, and the perception over the last while has been the PlayStation are basically censoring things on their platform. I mean, a while back, we were covering this when Sony were demanding edits to a horror game called Martha is Dead. When we take all of this context together, this does feel, to a lot of people, like a really big win. I mean, even just to take a look at the tweet, what can you see there? You can see pixelation. You know, it's that famous painting from the French Revolution with, you know, like the topless woman in the flag. Was it Civilization 6 used it in its trailer? But, you know, they'd censored the nipple. They'd blurred it out. And it just seemed like the most stupid, ridiculous thing. You know, whenever we see uncensored in all countries, and then what's there? Things that have been pixelated and censored, you obviously will think that, okay, clearly there was a lot of censorship on the cards for the game Stellar Blade. And because of that, a lot of fans have then very much said, hey, this is a big win. We have finally got Sony to stop censoring things, to stop changing creative visions. PlayStation, they got their rating, though, to the ESRB. They got that for Stellar Blade a while back. And the fact that it's rated does mean that we know exactly what is in the game, because if the ESRB don't approve every aspect of a game, you cannot sell it. So this game did not get the infamous AO, adults only rating, because retailers, like, if you get AO, retailers won't stock it. So instead what this got was a M17 plus rating. That's the same as GTA 5. So to compare the two and to see just how uncensored Stellar Blade is, for Stellar Blade, we have from the ESRB, blood and gore, language, suggestive themes, violence, no interactive elements. And for GTA, we have got blood and gore, intense violence, mature humor, nudity, strong language, strong sexual content, use of drugs and alcohol, users interact, in-game purchases. When you actually look at these ratings here, there is no particularly noticeable or explicit stuff in the Stellar Blade rating, right? Especially if you compare it to GTA, which is obviously a lot more explicit. And I think that does make sense, especially with GTA. I think being more of a hyperreal satire, right, of America, therefore it's going to be a lot more photoreal, right? That stuff's going to hit a lot harder than, say, a robot with some jiggle physics, right? So what gives here? Well, this is where things actually get fascinating and where the story gets deeper. Stellar Blade's PR team published that tweet in 2 languages, and they do not do this for every tweet. You then have to ask yourself, why was this formatted for Japanese users? And why do they frame this as a victory for uncensored in all countries? Because were Western countries actually the ones at risk of censorship? Or was it Japan? And that's where it gets interesting, because it turns out that while the Western-speaking audience was very focused on the jiggly behinds, the Japanese audience was actually worried about jib physics, like blood, gore. So the Japanese industry outlet, Automaton, they picked up that EA Japan's general manager, Sean Noguchi, while praising Stellar Blade, was talking about issues he had with the Japanese rating board's approach to the game. Now, that rating board we call a CERO, and this is what he said. However, Cero, you denied our Dead Space a rating because it included cross-sections of severed body parts and internal organs, but here we have both cross-sections and insides on display passed off with a 0D rating. I find this hard to accept. So basically an implication here is that because Stellar Blade had the backing of PlayStation as a platform holder, it had an easier time getting through the Japanese regulator. And even though while in the West, and I think with a lot of what's being whipped up, obviously when you have that IGN journalist saying, has this guy even seen what a woman is? And then people are like, well, I think so actually, because he's married to one. I guess sort of a relitigation of the sort of looking down the nose from aspect to the games media. That then very meant that the Western discussion of this game was framed along those lines. Whereas the actual victory against censorship, it has happened, it seems, in Japan, but for a different reason, because over in Japan, the discussion has been about what levels of gore are actually acceptable with different ratings. It's quite interesting. So you've got this EA guy who's basically saying, this is a double standard. You weren't giving the rating to Dead Space. Dead Space would have, had to have censored those things in order to get the rating. You've got third-party games that, that show exactly that same level of gore. Callisto Protocol was actually cancelled in Japan rather than Striking Distance actually going for a compromise here. And that actually means that this is legitimately a conversation about censorship. It's just not the one that I think most people were thinking of. There is, I suppose, a difference between censorship and taste, cultural taste policing. Maybe that's the thing. And we can obviously see how these have conflated and these have turned into the same story. It does seem that most of the people who are praising this on Twitter, though, are saying, ha, fantastic. Sony, they did not nerf the ass in the Western version or something like that. That's not the actual, it seems anyway, discussion in censorship that is going on. It's actually about Japan censoring gore. So what you basically have here is absolutely genius level PR, because if you look at their tweet, they are just saying that it's the same version in all countries that's uncensored, including the Japanese version. They post this also with Japanese text, obviously speaking to the Japanese audience who were concerned about basically the Japanese ratings board, because it turns out there have actually been issues with that ratings board and gore. But of course, this plays to the cultural, sort of policing discussion that has happened over in the West. So honestly, it is a case of absolute top marks to the people doing PR here. I suppose people like to say, never let a crisis go to waste. So this was just a fantastic way to string both of these stories together. And GG, top marks. You have absolutely PR'd the hell out of your game real well. Now, of course, that doesn't take away from other examples of like PlayStation, getting games changed with the West. Like that has also happened. It's just that with Stellar Blade, that doesn't appear to have happened, even though there very much was a meaningful censorship discussion that does impact big AAA games. The next thing, though, is decidedly not AAA. It is the return of Brackeys to YouTube. This is a very interesting thing, right? So Brackeys did just loads and loads of Unity tutorials. I say back in the day, it was only a few years ago, but basically they kind of wound up shop in 2020. It seemed like he wanted to kind of go on to other things. Unity themselves actually stepped in to thank him and of course the team behind him for their services to game development. Now, since then, they've still ran game jams and they've wanted to help people on their site, their forum, and on Discord. Their aim basically was that budget and a lack of knowledge shouldn't stop anyone from being able to just fire up some software and start making some video games. However, in the wake of the runtime fee controversy with Unity and just all of the stories around Unity, Unity didn't have a really great rep. And that meant that people were looking to other options. Of course, Epic, Unreal, that's definitely one of those options. Another one is Godot, though, which is an open source game engine, and it turns out Brackeys is, in fact, pretty excited about it, so much so that they've decided to start making some video tutorials again. So the idea here of basically that, hey, Brackeys is back, to a lot of people who will have, I suppose, grown up as, as learning or, aspiring, whatever, game developers, that'll actually mean something because they'll have very, very warm memories. We actually see 500,000 views for this video within one day, which is, that is an insane level of YouTube success. So what he says is that Godot has actually been around for a while, but March last year, Godot 4 was released, which was a huge rewrite of the engine, in my eyes, making it a great choice for a lot of game projects. And of course, it's now riding on a huge new wave of users, developers, and a huge influx of donations to the Godot Development Fund. He says he's been using it, he's been loving it, and that is basically why there is some content. Now, he's not like going and just saying that this is a direct result of Unity being shit, but he was the big Unity guy. Loads of even sponsored videos with Unity, which does make complete sense. If I was in his position back then, of course you'd take the Unity sponsorship. In this case, though, it's notably not Unity. It's notably the thing that for many people is being seen as a Unity competitor. Because if you want to go Uber AAA, you'd probably go with Unreal or something. But for a lot of games that typically would have been on Unity, Godot is actually surprisingly viable. Now, it does have a ways to go, but it is pretty remarkable what that project has been able to accomplish. So there you go. Brackeys is back, and I will be going and looking into those tutorials. Personally, I am multiple versions of Unity out of date since I was doing frontline development work, so I will be watching his content with great interest just to see how transferable are my skills. What is the scripting language in Godot like? All that sort of thing. It'll be really interesting. Anyway, there is your news. A PR firm being genius. User-generated content probably being the next battlefield for preservation in video games. Oh man, I'm even thinking about a number of Halo 3 maps. The Halo 3 maps that me and my friends made. It would be such a blast of nostalgia to fire those up again, but those servers are dead, right? Man, back up your user-generated content, back up the maps that you've made, because god damn it, we cannot rely on those being hosted. With that lesson, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you, of course, to everyone who supports us over at Bellular.games. And with that said, I will be back tomorrow.